Hey everyone, I'm Manero here, and in this video we're going to have a look at the brushes and illustrations I made during the first week of BrushTober 2023, so let's jump right into it. BrushTober is a special event where I create a Procreate brush and an illustration with that brush every day through October. You can see my daily progress on my social media accounts, so make sure to follow through the links below. If you want to know how you can get this brush set for free for a limited time, check out the info in the description of this video for all the details. Buckle up, because this year I decided to give some outlandish names to the brushes just for the sake of the fun. They don't necessarily mean anything specific, and sometimes the drawing I'll do with them will have something to do with the name, and sometimes it will just be a fun or weird name for no reason. So for day 1, I made this brush that I named Odyssey of the Lonely Toddler. I wanted to make this brush that would be cool for inking and line work, but also have a soft quality to it when applying low pressure. For the first illustration, this is one of those that I said would have something to do with the name of the brush. I let the name to inspire me, and it evoked some kind of artist warrior on a difficult journey and carrying his huge pencil weapon on his back. For the character design, I took inspiration from the animated show Primal, which if you haven't seen it, I totally recommend. Its visuals and aesthetics are out of this world, and the story and characters are really awesome. One thing I love about the show is how the main character is designed with such simple and robust shapes, and that's what I wanted to attempt here with my character. As for my process, I first worked through the whole idea as a loose sketch, and once I was happy, I lowered the opacity of the layer and started inking the whole thing with cleaner and more precise lines. For the color, I blocked the whole figure and the edge of the cliff together on a single layer to separate them from the background, and on another layer below, I worked on the sky, the moon, and the clouds. Then I manually colored the character, slightly changing the colors under a similar value for the different parts. I wanted the figure to be generally dark, to stand out as a silhouette against the bright moon behind it. At the end, I added a bit of rim light from the moon on the character and the ground. On day 2, the name I chose for the brush was Lost in the Layers. It's a painterly brush that I thought would work great by layering brush strokes and using its texture to give a nice touch to your paintings. For this drawing, I thought it would be fun to imagine some kind of anthropomorphic cartoon animal wearing a lot of layers of clothes. I first sketched the idea and decided to do a crocodile waiting for the bus in the sidewalk. At first I thought I would give him an insane amount of layers of clothes, but then I decided that just a few layers would be enough. For this illustration, I decided that I wouldn't do line art and just work through shapes and texture and add just the bare minimum amount of lines to define some of the details, like the line of the mouth, the eye, the nostril, and some details in the clothes. With alpha lock in the layers, I proceeded to render and texturize the different parts of the character. At the last minute, I thought the scene was needing a proper background, and I started experimenting to see what would look good. I finally did some walls and some kind of alley behind the crocodile, and used a dark purple for that, so the character could stand out more. On day 3, I was in the mood for some kind of brush with a bit of color dynamics, and this is what I did. It has an interesting shape, a tiny bit of texture and just enough color dynamics to be noticeable. I called this brush Huil. When doing so many illustrations in a single month, it is good to space out the creativity and just draw or paint straight from reference from time to time. It's cool because then instead of focusing on coming up with something to draw, you can just focus on shape design or studying the lighting in your reference. For this painting I used this photo reference by Anna Tokfatalina. I always find painting food very comforting, especially food with interesting shapes and colors. I love how the pinks and reds from the raspberries contrast with the yellow and the white from the cake, and the greens from the leaves and stems. I also think that the color dynamics in the brush really added something nice to this piece. On day 4, I created this brush called Saga of the Broken Texture. I was unsure about this one because geometric textures usually don't work very well, but I tweaked the brush settings and I managed to come up with something nice in the end. With such pretentious name, I thought it would be fun to paint a very normal, everyday object, such as a hanging kitchen towel. I think the texture of the brush really worked well to give the towel slight touches of fabric texture without being too much on the nose. By the way, I used this photo reference by reference pictures on Gumroad. Painting hanging clothes is always a great way to learn how to paint clothing folds and materials, and this was no exception. I really had a blast doing this little study, and I have to say that the brush really surprised me. That's probably one of the most fun things about making brushes for me, the fact that I get to feel surprised when I get to use one of my new brushes on an actual painting to get the whole experience from it and really see how well it works. During the creation process, sometimes things are pretty much intuition based for me, but the moment you make your first painting with that brush is when it gets real, and that's an awesome feeling. For day 5, I came up with this brush that I called Brushpocalypse. It's a highly textured line art brush. It allows for a wide range of line weight variations, and the bigger the stroke, the more noticeable the texture is, making it also perfect for coloring with a nice graphic quality to it. I wanted to draw some kind of skull, and I found this cool reference by Matthew Stern. I decided to draw it in a very minimalistic, geometrical way, using simple shapes like circles, curves, and straight lines. Once I was happy with my sketch, I cleaned up the drawing on a new layer. I filled the black parts like the eye socket and the nose hole by enlarging the brush size and taking advantage of that sweet texture. I then blocked the whole skull on a layer below the lines with a gray color, and I worked on the background behind it. I then alpha locked the skull and did a simple rendering with just two colors, one for the light and one for the shadows, focusing on the use of the gritty texture. As a final touch, I added these vertical lines with different colors to simulate some kind of dripping paint from below the skull that I think gave a nice touch to the illustration. On day 6 I wanted to create a brush that would allow for working with clean edges, but without sacrificing the use of a nice but subtle texture that shows up more or less depending on pressure. I called this brush a stroke to remember. During BrushTober, I always like to go back to painting animals from time to time because it is just too much fun. I found this amazing photo referenced by Christian in Gumroad, and when I saw that bird, I knew I had to paint it, with that incredibly round body, the small head, and the super long and narrow beak. I started by working on the background by painting the big shapes in layers, alpha locking each layer and painting the textures and different colors inside those areas. By breaking down the different elements of a painting with big, medium and small shapes, it simplifies the process and helps not to feel overwhelmed. I also broke down the bird itself into different size shapes in separate layers. This is a fantastic method that can help with painting from reference, without having to make a previous sketch, just by simply observing and painting directly with basic silhouettes. I definitely had a lot of fun with this illustration, and I also loved the color palette that I used based on the reference. For day 7, I worked on this brush that while it is very round, it also has an interesting and streaky texture in the edges. It varies the color a little bit as well when applying pressure with the Apple Pencil. I call this brush the Pressure Prophecy. Another subject that I love to paint is portraits of random people. I found this cool black and white portrait by Cesar Rincon that I thought it looked pretty cool. I liked the profile view and the beard and messy hair. Since it was black and white, I decided to do my version with low contrast, but vibrant colors instead. I started by framing the head, by painting the hair and the beard, and then using those as reference for where to place the rest of the features. One thing I loved about this brush is that if you use it with the smudge tool in Procreate, it generates these weird glitch-like textures that I thought looked very interesting, so I embraced them and used them to introduce texture and graphic elements to the painting. I also liked the fact that I kept this portrait very low contrast, by basically not using any dark values past certain points. I feel like it gave this painting its own character. At the end, I experimented a little bit with the curves tool until I found the color combination that I liked best. And this is it for today. These are the 7 brushes I did this week for my BrushTober Challenge 2023. Let me know in the comments which of these brushes was your favorite so far. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss the next video, and give me a thumbs up. Also make sure to check out my Gumroad page and consider making a purchase before the end of October to get this unique brush set for free. I have tons of Procreate brush sets available, and I'm sure something will suit your artistic needs. All the links are in the description below. Okay, thank you for watching. See you next time.